You're listening to episode 66 of the Confident Writer podcast with Jane Pike. Hi, fabulous one. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I am going to riff on a term that really came into my awareness recently. And I think it's such an important one to understand when it comes to really getting a handle on what it means to be resilient and being able to continue to show up for ourselves, to show up for our horses, and ultimately to show up for what is important in our lives as a sustainable presence. And that term is surge capacity. So surge capacity relates to that experience of when something comes at you that's perhaps unexpected or hard, but it in some way requires you to rally the troops. You know, you get that influx of energy, that influx of activation in your system when you really are called to rise to the occasion and bring all of your reserves to the party. So for many of us, this experience has been true for us during COVID. So at the start of a lockdown, for instance, that is where we would be drawing on internal reserves to really navigate or negotiate a situation that's A, totally unfamiliar to us, B, potentially completely blindsided us, and C, that we weren't really prepared for in any way because it's just not something that has entered our brain space previously to even think about being prepared for. So in that case, you can see there is a surge. There's something, a building, a rising, if you like, to the occasion that allows you to step up and meet that in the best way possible, in the wholest way possible that you were able to within what it was available to you at the time and what you were able to access. So we often meet challenges and situations with this surge, right? And when it's a one-off, that surge really benefits us. It's necessary. It's a liberation of sympathetic energy of adrenaline and cortisol into the system that allows us to grow bigger, to stand taller, and to feel stronger with whatever it is we're in relationship with at that time. Now, what happens then when this is not a one-off event, when over a more sustained period, we're being met with these consistent waves, consistent new experiences, consistent challenges that are coming at us on repeat dial, if you like, our surge capacity starts to get diminished. And as we experience that diminishment or that lessening of reserves, we can also understand that several things off the back of that are going to be impacted, such as our feelings of well-being, such as our feelings of mental strength, such as our capacity really to be able to meet that experience and hold our own space at the same time. Now, I want to talk about this in relationship to the global situation at the moment because I think that it would be amiss to try and kind of not use that example rather, and also to really understand that everything that's going on in our lives impacts us on every level. So we can't separate out our writing life, in my opinion anyway, from our regular life. What it is that's showing up there and how it is we're dealing with that is essentially what we're going to bring to every other relationship and every other aspect that we're involved with. It's part of being human, right? So understanding this surge capacity, understanding that when we're confronted with something in the first instance, that we may rise to the occasion with more robustness and more vitality than we might further down the line, gives us a really good understanding of how it is we need to pace ourselves. So let's think about COVID and let's think about the first lockdown. And I'm not going to make this a depressing conversation, but I just want to make this a conversation of awareness and really getting a grasp on how it is we can sustain ourselves for the long haul in the face of something that may not be meeting an immediate resolution, right? And this could be superimposed, it could be transferred to many other areas of our life. So if we think about a different example that this same situation would apply in, we could think about having a focus on something long term. So let's say you have a aspiration to compete at a really high level of competition. Let's just say that's your thing. But the way that you're going to get there, the way that that's going to become actualized is quite a long-term process. So in the beginning, when you first have that aspiration, when you first are able to marinate in the feeling of what that will feel like to get to that place, you're able to draw on a lot of good stuff that's in your system that automatically rises to the surface in support of that, yeah? It creates its own inspired cycle, its own motivating cycle, and that energy can sustain you for a certain period. It carries you through for a little while. But then what we know about anything long term is that we're soon required to really draw on the reserves that sit behind the reserve. Yeah, the reserve that in some instances we didn't even know was there. And then even beyond that, as it gets further and further in, we're having to draw deeper and deeper and make sure that at the same time we're filling those reserves back up. That we aren't constantly getting into a situation where we are depleting the resources that we have, but we're involved in a cycle of replenishment where as much as we are required to actually put in and give out, we are simultaneously drawing up on what it is that we need to fill ourselves back up. Yeah, does that make sense? That it's not all outward. There has to be some kind of inward replenishment process at the same time, a process of self-nourishment. So I'm in conversation with people all over the world. That is the beauty of my job and something that I really love about it. And what that means is that I'm also privy to lots of different experiences at the moment. I know that in New Zealand, we've been incredibly fortunate with the way that COVID has been handled and the situation that we find ourselves in currently. There are other countries that are going in and out of lockdowns on a fairly regular basis. And what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing a lot of is this depleted state of being, this depleted surge capacity where it's becoming less and less of a novelty, where the ideas that we had in the first instance to kind of meet the moment and be able to find some sort of okayness within it are starting to wear thin. And now it's like, right, this is the real test, isn't it? Like we thought that the real test was before, but actually now we're coming into something that is more longer term, more kind of like, how is it that we're going to adapt to this? And so what I want to talk about is firstly, that recognition that, yes, there is going to be a depleted reserve that we're ultimately meeting this with. So then how is it that we need to look after ourselves? What is it that we need to do to pay attention to what it is that we're feeling so that we actually are able to sustain a level of energy that provides for health and wellness? Now, again, this is going to filter through to every aspect of your life, but I just want you to think about how this is manifesting or how this is making itself known in all the different areas that you are a part of so that you can start to take some power back and really get yourself into a position where you're putting yourself first, not as a selfish way of being, but as a necessary way of being. So let's think about a couple of things that we can do to make sure that we are replenishing those reserves. And the first thing that came to mind, so I'm going to share with you three things. The first thing that came to mind was ensuring that you have some sort of body-based practice that you can return to. Because in the midst of everything that is going on, everything that you're called to be a part of, all of the distractions that spin around us, and let's face it, at this time, we are more likely to be on screens than ever. And as a consequence of being on screens more or spending more time in screen time, you're most likely to be on social media more. And as a consequence of being on social media more, you are going to be called to be distracted so much more, just in the nature of that technology. Sorry, my words are spinning away with me as I get excited. So a body-based practice is so important because there is an increased likelihood at the moment of getting stuck in your head. And when we get stuck in our head and disconnected from our body, we start to get disconnected from our own needs, disconnected from what it is we actually need to be paying attention to look after ourselves, and further away from intuitive understandings that we need to be hooked into in order to keep us happy and well. So a body-based practice doesn't have to be a really routined practice. It's something that brings you back into the edges of your skin, something that allows for the energy to be moved through your body. So we're literally mobilizing the body in some way, but in a way that you're actually tracking yourself. And what I mean by tracking yourself is this. Perhaps I'm feeling a little bit scattered, perhaps I'm feeling a little bit ungrounded, or perhaps I'm feeling a little bit upset, yeah? And from the work that I do, my understanding of that is however it is I'm feeling mentally and emotionally is an indication of where it is my nervous system is sitting right now. So it used to be that I used to try to change things at the level of thought, like think positive, think about 10 things you're grateful for, so on and so forth. And it's not that those things are bad, but it's a hard way to come at it because we're essentially dealing with things at the wrong end. So now I understand that if I can regulate my nervous system, if I can come back to myself in some way so that I'm more grounded, so that my body naturally takes a breath out, so I feel a bit closer to the edges of my skin and within the edges of my skin, that my thoughts are naturally going to soften as a result. So having a body-based practice is not just a nice thing to keep healthy, it is an absolute necessity if you want to be able to show up for life as a balanced human. Yeah, it's just part of our wiring. So for me, that is the first thing that I'm paying attention to. Am I moving enough? Am I doing enough to actually feel my body, to actually understand where it is I'm sitting currently, and mobilizing that energy in a healthy and connected way? So back to the tracking, because I kind of got a little bit off track there. The tracking involves recognizing what's going on for you right now and then seeing how that is manifesting in your body. When I do something movement-based then I understand, or I start to gather intel, if you like, or information on what works for me in different situations. So going for a walk or going for a run might be a really nice thing to do, but it might not always be the right thing to do. And if I start to gain awareness on what different sorts of movements suit me at different times, then I can start to be adaptive in keeping myself well. But I can only do that if I have an awareness about A, where it is I am sitting in the first place, B, what it is I do that can help me, and then C, registering how it is I feel afterwards. So this kind of like 3-step process of coming back into your body. That's the first thing, having some sort of body-based process that works for you. The second thing is to put your wellness first. Now, it sounds really easy, sounds super obvious. In practice, not so much, in my experience, because we're trained out of that bodily connection, out of that visceral connection. We're trained into thinking that we have a variety of things on the outside that we need to tick off, that we need to check the email, that we should be on social media answering those messages, that we need to tend to the needs of our family or work or like the list goes on. But ultimately, if you're involved in a process of always looking outward, then things are going to get depleted. And when we're in a situation when we're aware that the current climate that we're operating in is much more high tensile than usual, that there are more demands on us than usual, that our surge capacity is going to be reduced because we have a pressurized situation that isn't going to immediately let up, prioritizing your wellness is absolutely first and foremost. So for me, wellness first in all of every situation that I'm able to influence. And you can even think about how it is you're constructing or establishing the rhythm of your day for the most part to ensure that wellness and body-based activity are included in there as a compulsory piece. Very important. I just had a pause because I didn't want that to sound regimented as such, but I think that the beauty of feeling this way, of actually moving in this way, of establishing a body-based practice, of putting your wellness first, gets you into a position where that becomes something that feels so good to you and that is so stabilizing and nourishing that it starts to fuel itself as its own process. It builds its own momentum. The third thing is to claim your space. Now, there is a lot going on right now that is competing for your attention. Political conversations and arguments, social media, you really only have to turn it on to find something divisive or upsetting or that pushes your buttons. It's not hard. And when we get into that cycle, it's really easy to think or easy to convince yourself that you are somehow out of control of what it is that's going on and that you have no choice but to surrender to the thoughts that are coming in. And what I want to say to that is, yes, this might be our reality at the moment. Yes, there are a lot of different things that are competing for our attention that are specifically designed to actually snag our attention, so some of the technology that we're a part of, that is where they're getting their resources from, basically through drawing our attention in. And so what we have to be aware of is, okay, what is it that I need to do to claim my space? If I feel like my focus is being scattered in 1,000 different directions, if I feel distracted, if I feel like I have a lot of mental clutter going on right now, which is something that I've certainly noticed in myself, how is it that I can be in control of getting that space back? That involves really actively blocking out distraction. And for me, a key part of that is actually turning off my phone and putting it out of my eyesight, like putting it somewhere I can't see it, and doing something that is not connected to being on a screen. And when I've done that, I have found that the white space, the space where creativity lives, the space where peace lives, grows bigger and bigger because my attention is not constantly being fragmented in 1,000 different directions. Very simple things, very kind of obvious things, but not so obvious things at the same time, and or things that we need to be reminded of all the time. So to wrap this up, surge capacity. We are rising to the occasion, and we do that very successfully once or maybe twice. But then over time, when we're involved in something that has a long-term energy expenditure on us, we need to start to think more broadly. We need to start to think more strategically. That's the word that I was trying to get. We need to think more strategically about how it is we are going to be the protectors of our own headspace and of our own energy. So if you're coming back into another period, or you can feel yourself coming into the second wave or the next chapter of an experience that's had some energy behind it or has required something of you already, don't be surprised if you feel a bit blah coming into it. But what we want to be mindful of is, right, instead of just being caught up in this wave and washed down the river, we understand that we are perhaps in a higher risk position of suffering some kind of mental or emotional fallout as a consequence of this, simply because we don't have the same reserves and we don't have the same resilience to draw on as we might have done in the first instance. So what are we going to do? With that knowledge, what are we going to do? How is it that we can get ourselves into a better position to be able to cope this time around? Or to even be able to thrive this time around, to feel well in the midst of it. And so those three things, which sound very simple and again kind of like obvious, are ones that I return to, anchor points that I return to, of how do I get back into my body? Yeah, how do I feel into the edges of my skin? How do I feel my feet on the ground? What helps me feel balanced in that way? What nourishes me? Putting my wellness first. Wellness before everything. Because once you are well, you're able to meet and serve and help and attend to everything in your life in a way that assists those people and those situations also. Without that, you're depleting yourself, and ultimately you're not going to be a sustainable presence in what it is that you're actually required to be in. 3, claim your space. Remove distractions from your zone, if only for short periods of time. Do something to actively take yourself out of the realm of distraction and scattered focus, and to remind yourself, here I am, here it is, my feet are on the ground, my crown is towards the sky, I'm open, I can hold dignity in my body, I can feel a sense of my own worth, I can connect to that feeling that I matter, and just for this next few seconds, here I stand in that space. That's the space we want to get to. That's the space we want to be continually coming back to and reconnecting to. Here I am, here I stand, this is my space. Thanks, guys. I really wanted to share that with you today because I think that these awarenesses are really important for us to be able to cultivate ongoing resilience, ongoing connection, and to just continually be reminded about what it is that matters. I hope that was useful to you. Please find a way of nourishing yourself in the midst of everything that's going on, of looking after yourself, because you're precious and that is necessary, and you are the only one who ultimately can do that for yourself. Have a great rest of your day. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you in the next episode.